We had a story we wanted to take a closer look at, and it's got some big bucks attached to it because you don't need an algorithm to know that AI is the hottest investment right now outside of frozen concentrated orange juice. Investors are seeing a mountain of money that NVIDIA is making, and they're going to be giving startups all the funding they could possibly hope for. Now, while this massive funding for Silicon Valley startups is old news, at least here on the rundown, the recent wave has seen these huge investments coming very early in the startup stage instead of in later rounds, when they've built a product and they're ready to release it onto the market. 2023 saw almost $22 billion in AI startup funding. The average deal per startup is $55 million per company. In case you were wondering, the Silicon Valley average for a startup funding round in that early stage is around $8 million. However, the investors are starting to ask questions about revenue, and startups are having a hard time answering them. Are we seeing the promise of AI meet the reality of the business world, Stephen?
Well, I'm saying not quite yet. After all, we did just see Andreessen Horowitz start a new AI fund. We were actually going to cover that on the rundown, but then we said no. This is the rundown. We don't cover stuff like that. But it is out there. Essentially, there's a brand new fund. It's going to be funding the next wave of Silicon Valley AI startups. Um, and so I think it's too early to say that funding of AI startups is dead. That being said, I think that a lot of people are getting a lot more savvy about not just throwing money blindly at AI. We're seeing some really big valuations for companies with really small revenue numbers right now. And that's based on the promise of what the company could do in the future. And could that company meet those expectations? Oh, heck yeah. I mean, some of these valuations sound really big. I mean, $1 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion. I mean, that's big numbers there, big money. Um, but that being said, that's not huge money for a Silicon Valley startup. So, could they meet investor expectations and have a successful acquisition or IPO or something? Yeah, sure, I could see it happening. On the other hand, I think that people are maybe starting to say, maybe we don't need to be investing quite this much. Particularly, one of the things that occurs to me, a lot of the money that's gone into AI startups has been turned right around and gone straight back out the door to NVIDIA to buy more and more and more hardware. And a lot of the billions of dollars that we see invested in this area are literally just signed over as checks to NVIDIA. You'll see numbers coming out this week as well. Amazon and Microsoft and Meta and so on are announcing all sorts of acquisitions of additional hardware investments in the tens of billions, high tens of billions in some cases. Tesla just announced as part of their earnings about how much money they've spent on NVIDIA GPUs. There's a lot of companies spending a lot of money on a lot of hardware. And frankly, I'm wondering when that gravy train is going to end, especially with regard to training, because we have companies like CoreWeave, Microsoft with Azure, certainly is right there, Google, Amazon, that can basically let you rent the hardware to do your training instead of having to buy it and deploy it yourselves. And then you can start looking at deploying applications on less hardware in terms of inferencing. Now, there's still going to be some training needs. There's going to be transfer learning. There's going to be fine-tuned training. But I think increasingly we're going to see the end of the I'm going to make my own billion parameter large language model thing. And instead, we're going to see the I'm going to take this off the shelf one. I'm going to retrain it. I'm going to use RAG. I'm going to use transfer learning. I'm going to figure out some way of basically making this existing model work for me and my application. And that doesn't require as much hardware. I think that's really what we're going to see from a lot of the startups that are coming out, especially the next wave startups. It doesn't make sense for them to retrain another giant LLM. Now, that being said, I could see them building a completely different type of machine learning model and needing a lot of hardware to train that. But not everybody's going to be in that game. Instead, what I think there's going to be is a lot more companies that are going to be using off the shelf models, using cloud based compute and doing some very cool stuff with AI that doesn't maybe require this kind of investment. What do you think, Tom?
No, Steven, you're so optimistic.
I'm
I
so
love that
nuanced.
about you. I would be willing to follow that line of logic and be very optimistic if I didn't see everybody spending billions of dollars to buy NVIDIA clusters to build slightly different chatbots from each other. When I'm a startup in Silicon Valley and I'm making a thing, whether it's a server or a software package or whatever, if something were to happen and they had to liquidate my company, they can sell that for money, right? Like I can go buy, take all the hardware and sell it out the back door or sell it at an auction and recoup some of my investment. If I spend billions of dollars to create an algorithm that everybody else is creating, what's that worth to anyone? Hardly anything. And I think that that's where the problem is coming here is when you look at a hardware based startup or someone who's doing software, you have an iterative process, right? Like I can see checkpoints along the way where like, okay, you've got this going. The UX looks pretty good. You're going to add these features or, it runs and it runs with between two of them. And I, as an investor, I can see that you're making progress. I can't see that if the algorithm's opaque, right? Oh, great. You asked it, what's the difference between a cow and a goat? And today it didn't freak out and want to find Sarah Connor. That to me says that the investment money that they're pouring into this black hole, whether or not it's just going to hardware or not, is not producing tangible returns. And like if you read the Wall Street Journal article that we've linked here, they're basically taking a huge bath on everybody out there because they all have kind of the same story. We spend all of this money trying to develop something and then we don't know what to do with it. I mean, look at the recent story where a bunch of AI startup folks just wholesale went to Microsoft after the whole open AI issue. Like they had, they were considered to be some of the smartest kids on the block, and they created a chatbot that helped you talk about your feelings. I'm not saying mental health is not important. It absolutely is. But do we need to spend $4 billion to create a chatbot that will replicate what I used to have with Dr. Sabetso back when I ran a Sound Blaster 16 ISA card in DOS? I mean, it's slightly better and more understanding. But my problem with this whole thing is, like you said, all of this money is just being reshuffled around. If I'm sending all of this money to you and you're sending it directly to NVIDIA, why am I not sending it directly to NVIDIA? It's because everybody wants to pull the slot machine handle on the chance that one of these companies becomes the next NVIDIA. It's not going to happen. But they're hoping to get enough of their investment back that they can do something about it. I think that even compared to some other Silicon Valley startups that we've seen in the past, this is an even bigger chance because if they fail, and let's be fair, in the most cases, when they fail, there's nothing to buy. There's no value in this company at all that you can recoup your investment. You're literally throwing that money away. And if you want to throw money away, send it my way because you know what? I can spend money with the best of them. And I'll even order NVIDIA hardware if that's what it takes.
Well, and there you go, Tom. There is something to buy for some of these companies, the NVIDIA hardware. I mean, this stuff is like gold. Unfortunately, it's only like gold for a short time. And it could be that companies that have invested over the last couple of years in NVIDIA hardware may find themselves sitting on, well, let's say not so much gold as they think once the new hardware comes out. We're already seeing that orders for H100 are slowing as the H200 launch nears commercial capacity. And we're going to start seeing companies investing in a new direction there. Same thing with a lot of this stuff. I mean, outdated hardware. Heck, the U.S. government is selling one of their supercomputers, and right now the auction is up to $27,000. Not a joke for a supercomputer. Because it's a 7-year-old supercomputer, and who wants that? It's going to cost a lot to move it. Frankly, I think we could see this with some of these AI startups in a few more years, where their once incredible investments in AI hardware become kind of a boat anchor because they're hopelessly out of date. But moving back to my optimistic and sunny worldview, I do think that there is an opportunity here. If I was advising investors, which I absolutely am not, I am in no way qualified to advise you on how to spend your money. But if I was one of them investors, I'd be looking at a product that did a thing. I know, radical idea, right? I would be looking at a startup that has a product that has a valuable function, a market that has customers with money to spend, and that actually produces tangible results. That would be incredible. And there are, I mean, despite the naysayers, Tom, there are some companies that are doing some pretty cool things. So, for example, again, mentioned in the Wall Street Journal article, is Cognition AI. This is a really interesting startup. They're doing some really cool stuff about generative coding, basically helping software developers develop more, better, faster. They've gotten a really nice amount of funding, but they're actually producing a product that saves customers money, and customers are actually buying it. That's an example, I think, of a successful product. On the flip side, a lot of the self-driving car startups burn through all their cash and have kind of not a lot to show for it because, frankly, there just wasn't much of a market for that product among people who would pay for that product, as, for example, Tesla is seeing on a daily basis with their insanely expensive and strangely named full autonomous driving. The point being that there really are useful applications, there really are useful products. I think people just need to start looking for that. And again, another piece of advice, unsolicited and certainly not qualified, would be to take a look at companies that are not just building more freaking chatbots. Take a look at companies that are using AI to do other interesting things because all of the techniques and the tools and the processes that let you build an LLM can be used to build other types of artificial intelligence that can actually solve useful products or useful problems. And that's, I think that's where the market should go.